Hello everyone, Katharin here with Real Chicago and Real 360. Excited to be interviewing my next guest, which is Full Spectrum Features. Hey, welcome. Glad to have you guys here. Happy AAPI month. We get a whole month. Yay!
Yeah, we get a whole month.
We get a whole month.
Wow.
So obviously there's a lot to talk about, but I was just kind of talking to Brian about what people are doing on their free time and what's going on in your own personal lives.
I think all of us in the first month were kind of and by all of us I mean like the world, kind of just like, what's happening, what do we do, how do we operate in this world? And I think now it just feels a little more okay, we know what we're doing, we know what well, some semblance of like, okay, this is the new normal. And so it's just been, I feel like now we're working full steam ahead. I think what I've been doing personally, it's been a lot of hanging out at home. I'm living for, I mean, there's a lot of new stuff coming out, but I'm rewatching a lot of stuff.
That's cool. I rewatched a lot of stuff too, because I'm like always studying.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. My guilty pleasure is True Blood. I started watching that.
That's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun. I watched True Blood, and then I worked on a feature as production designer with Carrie Preston, who plays Irene, the redhead.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of not, I don't know, like a celebrity craziness, because you kind of do it, but it was like, oh shit, I'm like literally watching you on television and turning around, and here you are on set with me, Carrie Preston. You're amazing. And she's amazing. She's a fantastic actress and Juilliard actress.
Yeah. Well, a lot of hanging out inside. I think my saving grace every day is at least trying to I've been trying to mimic my commute. So like taking a walk in the morning and then taking a walk when I'm done.
Oh, that's very
at the end
smart.
of the day, just to create some normalcy. But yeah, I've gotten to know my neighborhood really well, and it's been this interesting kind of experiment where like there's a lot more kids playing outside and a lot more people who are socially distancing but still like meeting each other outside, which has been kind of I guess a positive outcome of what we're going through.
Very cool. Very cool. So talking about Full Spectrum Features, tell me, how did it all begin, and what was your first film you guys made?
So Full Spectrum Features. So Eugene and I, Eugene is the ED who is currently on a sabbatical. He just had a baby Arlo. Yeah, super cute kid. So he had been in film, and then he left to do a PhD in philosophy, actually, for 8 or 10 years. And during that time, the digital revolution in film happened. So his friends from, when he was actually pursuing film as a career, 10 years later were like, hey, Eugene, check out this film we just shot. And he's like, wow, what did this cost? Millions and millions of dollars? And they're like, no, it cost $25,000, And I think that compelled him, in a number of ways, that compelled him to come back into the industry. And he had moved to Chicago just right after that. And he and I had met. I play taiko, Japanese drums. And so we were performing, and he came backstage after our show because he was working on an experimental film at that time. And he was like, hey, I'm looking for some like Asian American specific kind of like driven music to go along with this experimental film, which was called Self-Deportation. And it was about the experiences of non-white Americans who are always assumed to not be Americans and what that's like.
Yeah, I can relate.
So we did that project, and then I did not have a background in film. I was at that time working at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. And we did that project, and then he brought me a script after that, and he was like, hey, I've been working on this script. It's called The Orange Story. It's about the Japanese American incarceration during World War II. I'm Japanese American. And he's like, you seem to have a lot of connections to this community. We need community support. What do you think about coming on to help me, produce this project? And that was really the first kind of like the inklings of Full Spectrum, because that was before the company had started, we had a budget of like $2,500 or $5,000 to do this thing. And he and I sat down with the director and we're like, what's the point of making this film and having it sit in somebody's hard drive for the rest of our lives and having our parents like kind of pat us on the head and be like, hey, great job on that film. So we wrote a grant to the federal government, actually the National Park Service, and we turned that project from a $5,000 project to a $170,000 project with an educational impact, like distribution tour attached to it as a way to, create impact. And that was the beginnings, because we then had to create an organization to house that grant. And that was kind of the beginnings of Full Spectrum in 2015.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's kind of a wild story. And so
That's a wild story, but it's relevant. I mean, that's how a lot of things come together. There's a need, there's a need for better stories. There's a need for Asian American stories out there, queer stories, people of color. And it's great that it's obvious that there's backing to that now in the world,
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, we always talk about how diversity is very hot,
Oh, it's
and
hot.
I think it's really about who's behind the decisions and who controls the money. And I think what we as Full Spectrum try to do is to put the folks who are the storytellers and the folks that are from those communities in the position. This is about equity and economic mobility and the ability to sustain a career, not just like be kind of a one-off, like one and done, diversity is hot type of moment, but to really create a structure of equity so that more of full spectrums can exist in the world, and we're not like the rare bird where we get called to talk about diversity in film all the time.
Yeah, it'd be great that someday we're just great filmmakers and not great Asian American filmmakers, or
exactly.
great queer filmmakers, or great female filmmakers. Yes, very much so.
And maybe one day we won't have to have a month where we remind people that we're also American.
Yes, exactly. Whole 31 days.
Yeah.
So speaking of great Asian American people, tell me about your team. You have a beautiful collage of people that work with you.
Yeah.
American group.
Brian's one of them, so I'm going to toss it over to Brian to have him talk about himself.
Yeah, so my name is Brian. I predominantly oversee the distribution activities, and I think that to kind of echo off of what Jason was saying, I think he brings up a great point of we can make the work, and we can find money, make the work, and then create this great piece of film. But if no one's watching it, then one, what impact does it have? And two, how can we make this sustainable for the artists to continue to make the work, right? And I think that part there about sustainability and continuing to make the work is key. And so I think a lot of what we've been doing, at least since I've been involved, has kind of added more meat to that part of the operation, right? So we're thinking about what are the different avenues through which we can monetize the content. How can we prepare artists better to face kind of that conversation about monetizing? And so one of the things that we're launching actually this week is a producers lab, which is it has been organized by Gregory Collins, who's our director of artist programs, and he's one of the great members of our team as well. We also on our team is Sophia Villela, who oversees our marketing and communications, and she has also been managing a lot of operations that kind of speak to this again. So we started a program called Shorts from the Underground, and that's a great example of like, how can we put this work that's getting done at the forefront, and then the more that we can create awareness for this work, the more we can artists can take these stepping stones towards creating bigger work that can then be ideally monetized for their own financial sustainability, and they can continue to do the work. so yeah, we there are more members of the team, and we have a lot of different projects that I think we can definitely dive into. But those are a couple that came to mind off the top of my head.
Awesome. Fantastic. So thinking about distribution a little bit, I know, there's no theatrical distribution like before. I mean, getting things in the theater, especially on an independent level, especially with maybe a director that isn't as well known, maybe without the $1 million, it's streaming videos. Obviously, that's going to be a huge direction. Film festivals will be a huge direction. How about international distribution, though?
That's a great question that I've been thinking about a lot myself, as I'm thinking about like where can we find more money?
Yeah, where do we find more money?
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that's really interesting is that although we always think of our own stories as like very local, there's definitely some aspects that can resonate rather quickly in other communities. And I think a perfect example is one of our the latest feature that we've been distributing, which is Holy Trinity, which is the story of a queer millennial dominatrix who huffs a can of magic aerosol and gains the ability to speak to the dead. And that's a film that it premiered at Outfest in June of 2019, and it's been doing the festival circuit since. And we did a Chicago premiere in September. And what's been interesting about the reception is that there are, right off the bat, you can say it's a very niche film, right, from the subject matter. And it has resonated with some very specific communities throughout Europe. Particularly, there's a couple festivals in Germany that they're like, this is exactly the kind of stories that we're looking for.
I could see Germany liking that storyline.
And so it becomes a question of like, how can we, without the millions of marketing dollars that the studio system has at their disposal, how can we tap into these communities that are interested in these stories? And then create, again, a financial opportunity for it. I think it's definitely there. I think it's just finding a way to connect the dots.
So go ahead, Jason, please.
Yeah, I was going to just add that. So we're also working with, I think a lot of like what our model is to, build like deep relationships. And we've been working with a director from Japan who has, like a keen interest in producing here and directing projects here in the States. And we met him last year, and it's become like a great relationship. Brian mentioned the so we're the Shorts from Underground series is a collaboration with Mana Contemporary, and actually right now we're featuring for this week and next week we're featuring Tetsuya's work. The director from Japan, his name is Tetsuya Mariko. And what's been interesting is that like, sharing his work here. So we're like distributing some of his work in the States, and he's actually brought us projects. So now that we're now developing a project, actually very relevant to COVID-19. It's called, I think the working title right now is State of Emergency. And what they're trying to do is produce a film in this moment, most likely through, the actors themselves having to like set up their iPhone cameras. And it's a project that's backed by Amazon Japan. And the idea, what I love about it is that Tetsuya is kind of tapping into his like friend network all over the world, including here in Chicago, since we've recently become, acquaintances, and we're trying to figure out like, how do we tell that global story about what's going on in a very personal way with the constraints that we're facing. And I think stuff like that, like if you can bring people together like that, there's distribution possibilities, not just internationally, but also here. And it really opens up a conversation about, like, especially if we can figure out how to produce something like that in a short amount of time with like not a lot of like expensive equipment, that becomes a very interesting model, I think, for like future distribution for us.
Fantastic. So there's also this thought, and I think it's changing now because of the world we live in, that short films can't be distributed, short films can't make money, short films, make features. What do you guys think about that? Do you guys back features and shorts just like? I mean, is it really more so about the content? Can you make money back on short films?
I can take a first stab and then I'll pass it to Brian because he's in charge of our creative distribution. But what we found is, yeah, I think booking a single short film, obviously for, like an 8, 10, 15-minute program is quite difficult. But when you pair those, like a few short films together that are thematically connected, and then you can build a conversation around that with communities that either are impacted by that story or want to learn more about that story. There's a lot of creative solutions to distributing that and actually making money on that. And I don't know if you know, but Full Spectrum, we very intentionally from the beginning set ourselves up as a 501c3 nonprofit. And here, I'm gonna lift the hood on some Full Spectrum secrets here. So one way that for us, like, profit isn't the number one goal, right? It's like impact, it's social impact. It's ensuring that people understand like the beauty of what it means to work in diverse worlds and have diverse teams and have a diversity of opinions, coming together. And so that 501c3 model helps us to be more creative, I think, in the way that we fund things. So for example, we had a collection of Japanese American shorts that were all narrative. Very difficult to book any one individual of those, and also very difficult to book in a place like a public library or university, right? Because they don't have the money. So what we did was we surveyed, 50 to maybe it was more like we surveyed 500 different public libraries across the country, and we told them, hey, if we were to find the funding for this program, would you book it? So taking away the monetary compensation that we would require from each individual organization, and we collected that, we got probably about 100 responses. We collected those responses, we went to our grantor and said, look, we found 100 people who, these public libraries in the middle of nowhere who want to learn about Japanese American history. Fund that, and that will unlock at least 100 different points of impact for you, right? And so that's a different model, using our 501c3 status to consider, to work with funders and connect funders to the presenters, right? And so it takes away the financial barrier for them. It offers us an opportunity and like kind of a lane to actually distribute, have that impact. And the funder, they look great because they've just put together a 100 city, tour of this shorts program.
Yeah, I think I would add to what Jason's talking about. My immediate thought to your question, Kay, is in the traditional model that films make money, the short answer would be no. Right? There isn't a distributor waiting to pick up a single short film and take it to theaters around the country. Like, all of those things are an investment. And when you think of the traditional monetization models for films as a entertainment piece, it's simply the math is not there. However, I think the opportunity that we're in with going back to Jason's point about the digital revolution and how rapidly that has changed, even in 5 years ago when Eugene had that moment, to where we are today, is we're in a place where with the content you can reimagine new ways that it can be used, and I think that's one thing that I'm always trying to evangelize for, is that maybe a short film as this 20-minute piece that you're hoping to get into Sundance and then someone's going to buy off of your hands is not a model, but maybe this 20-minute short is better delivered to someone as, I don't know, 10 2-minute bits that pairs along with an educational program that you're trying to put together. And it doesn't only have to be social impact. There are ways that it can be comedic. There's ways that it can be commercial. And I think I think branded content is like a perfect example of like kind of blending the lines. I think they, you know, typically that's, I would say like product first, you know, is coming from that direction of like, whatever, this cosmetic line wants to do a series of tutorials. But there's another way of angling that coming from the artist and the statement that they're trying to make. And if you can find the model where this becomes monetizable, it's definitely possible.
Very cool. So thinking a little bit about fiscal sponsorships, I know that's a big part of what you guys are great, you know, and involved in. So tell me a little bit about how people can get involved in a fiscal sponsorship.
Sure. So, you know, we set up our program again in order, because we're a very small team, and I think as you know, producing projects and like, you know, being the capital P producers on projects, like with a very small team, it's hard to kind of multiply that across many projects. But we realize that, you know, it makes a lot of sense for us to, if there's mission alignment and there's a good reason for us to get behind a project, but we don't have the time to invest all of our resources in actually producing that. There's the fiscal sponsorship kind of arm of Full Spectrum is a great way for people who you know, are trying to access donations and different things to work with Full Spectrum so that their project becomes kind of in the wheelhouse of Full Spectrum, and they're able to take advantage of being a partner project with us, but have the freedom and capacity to not be constrained by our own resources, so they can run and they have the support of ours. And what we're trying to do with that program is, I think a lot of fiscal sponsorship programs you see out there are kind of pass through. So it's like, yep, you know, you can sign up and people can donate, but that's like that's where the level of service ends. And we really are trying to kind of find the balance of not just being a pass through, but really offering some like guidance and assistance, and how we think about kind of the soup to nuts model of thinking about what your distribution strategy is when you're in development.
I think I would add to that, you know, I think part of what we're constantly thinking about in terms of finding the balance of what we can offer, I think we're always thinking about like what would alleviate a team of creators. I think as we were talking earlier, Kay, like I think people get together to make a film because they're creative and they're thinking about the story that they want to tell, and they're not thinking about the tax exempt receipts and whatnot, and the accounting and all of those kinds of things. And so we're always trying to figure out what are ways that we can expand the services that we can offer to kind of offer that back office support to projects. And I think fiscal sponsorship is like a great example of kind of like getting your feet wet a little bit, right? We can facilitate you gathering money and all of that accounting, and just, you know, cutting the check back to you. And so that's one of the things that I think as we continue to do this and learn more, that to me would be like where to go next, is like what other back office services can we offer?
Yeah, so people who are thinking about or who have projects and might want to apply, it's quite simple. You just go to our website. Under the program section, there's a fiscal sponsorship page. You can read about what we're offering through that program, and then you can actually submit an application directly to the website.
And where in development in a film should they be when they reach out to you?
I would say for fiscal sponsorship, we consider, you know, any stage to be, you know, a point at which we can jump in and help. We tend to like to be, you know, for projects that we're producing and like going to get really involved in, we like those to come in very early. Because again, like I said, I think one thing that we've noticed, especially in the independent film industry, is that, and rightfully so, the artist or the director or the creator is really only thinking up to like the premiere of that project, but what creates sustainability for that person. And they, you know, they honestly, like, it's so hard to be like an independent artist these days, because you need to be a digital marketer, like a business strategist, and right, like, so the best situation for us is when they can come in, very early on, so that we can start talking to them about, kind of force the conversation about thinking, um, around like the product viability and like what the distribution strategy is, because that in some way, shape, or form impacts some of the things and the decisions you'll make early on in the process.
Real quickly, thinking about liability, I was talking to a producer friend recently, and he said he'd be afraid to produce something, let's say in June or July after COVID, because of the liability of people on set. Do you see that there's going to be kind of this spike in the thing like liability insurance, safety and security precautions, maybe even like workman's comp being required for people on set? I mean, how far do you think we're going to have to go to secure lives, literal lives, are safe at work?
That's like, I feel like that's a question that every single human is trying to answer right now.
I mean, basically, yeah. I mean,
yeah, like
it's a pretty open question for just everyone, even you're down to the PAs. How are we all gonna survive this?
Yeah, I don't know, Brian, if you have a thought about this. To me, it's so, like, I was actually talking to Georgia, another one of our employees, yesterday, because Georgia was actually right in the middle. She was 10 days into a 20-day shoot on a film that we were really excited about, called All Jacked Up and Full of Worms.
Oh, funny.
And we were 10 days into that project, and we had to pull the plug on it because it was like right in the middle of March, and I had to drop a hard drive off to her yesterday. So actually, we, again, socially distanced, we passed that thing off, and she was kind of discussing. She was, like, we were trying to figure out who to call and like what kind of information, but there's just nothing, coming out. And I think, yeah, it's going to be a huge challenge, because you think about set culture and you think about like how intense it is, and how close you are to other people,
how small those rooms are, with no air, no windows.
Yeah.
The refrigerator's not even running right now. We can't even get ice.
Exactly. I just, like, it's going to be such a challenge in such a new world.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think smaller sets will be big. Go ahead, Brian.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just gonna just add that, echoing what Jason's saying, I think it's the $1 million question that everybody's thinking about, not just for our industry, but for all industries, right? I think
school, for
right,
children's school, as simple as
right. Yeah, that's a perfect example, and I think that for production, I don't know. I've been reading a lot about in some of the trade publications, it seems like the studios are having continuous conversations about how to do that. And I think it's like finding a balance between what is, how soon they need to start back in production, and how do we keep everyone safe. I was like reading this article where there was just a lot of speculation about, what would it look like, what kind of health measures would be taken. I'd be curious though how that translates though to an independent production. If now production had to supply PPE and screening and temperature checks and all kinds of stuff. As we read more about like how the economy will reopen in phases, I'd be curious how that can translate into independent production, because I mean, Kay, you've gone through it all the time. Like it's such a labor of love, and it's and blood, sweat, and tears that like make that happen. And so like this would be in many ways a financial, like a very necessary financial expense. And so it's like, how do we find the balance?
I think you literally can contract COVID through blood, sweat, or tears. Like,
right.
Like you're literally going to die when you're running blood, sweat, and tears now. But I also think about bigger sets having so many people involved. It's almost, when you have a 20-person crew versus a 200-person crew, I mean, how much does that also help you limiting your liability at the same time?
Yeah.
That being said, I'm going to wrap this up with you guys. I could talk to you forever about this topic, but is there anything else, any other future projects besides the one you were just working on that got pulled? Anything you guys want to throw out there besides Holy Trinity?
I do.
Right.
I've got a couple selfish plugs. I think that, you know, in where we're at right now, with COVID, it has obviously made everybody in the creative arts sector improvise and think of new ways to do things. We are actually we annually do the Chicagoland Shorts program, which is a celebration of filmmaking from the city, and we have decided that, you know, the program will be done virtually. We are doing a virtual premiere actually very soon. I don't know, Kay, when this interview is coming out, but it's on Thursday, May 21st.
Oh, it should be out before then. Yeah.
Awesome.
Put it in there, yeah.
And yeah, we're very excited to be able to still bring the experience. We're going to try our best to mimic a lot of the great things that you get out of the in-person event. We are doing it with the music box, which is very exciting. And that should be on May 21st at 7 p.m. is the starting time.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, I'll have to tune in as well because May 21st, that's perfect. I'll be there.
I would just make one more pitch is that, so we're also trying, you know, as everybody's pivoting and, you know, kind of readjusting to you know, COVID-19, I think everybody is trying to figure out what, you know, virtual engagement and virtual screenings look like. We are launching our VOD platform that Brian's working on. So if folks are watching this, please come back to Full Spectrum and check that out, and help us out by, you know, renting something from the catalog. And the last point I'll make, and this is very much mission alignment with Full Spectrum and like the way that we think about equity in the world, is we're really focused in on, you know, the pandemic's impact on people is not equal, right? And so there's certain communities who are being impacted by this, and I think Chicago has been kind of like uplifted nationally as a place where, you know, it's hitting our like South and West Side communities, our Black communities, much harder. We think about people like who have disabilities, and you know what that does for them. And so we're working on different types of programming with Real Abilities actually to do workshops around what accessibility looks like as we all pivot to, you know, a virtual platform. We've also we're also supporting a Cinema Workers Fund that's a partnership with SIF and other folks, but really, you know, for us, trying to key into the folks that are the most marginalized and trying to figure out how we can support those people through this moment.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys very much for your time. So it's just incredible the things that you guys are doing, the programs you have. Obviously, go to the website, check them all out. Sounds like there's so much activity, and everyone could really benefit from checking it out.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
And we'll sure be talking sometime soon. Absolutely.
All right. Thanks a lot, Kay.
I'll talk to you later, guys. Thanks for tuning in. This is Katharin with Real Chicago and Real 360 saying, see you later.